Israelis have been a bit quiet on exactly what the nature of the targets were, but we know from some of the information that has come out from Israel, as well as what has come out by the Iranians and some opposition elements within Iran, is that the targets basically consisted of air defense systems, some S-300 systems. Those are Russian advanced surface-to-air missile meant to protect the defend secret and strategic military installations, whether nuclear or just general infrastructure, and some drone factories and production lines, but more importantly, the facilities that are used to mass produce the long-range ballistic missiles that Iran has used to attack Israel with in the first attack back in April and in the second attack on October 1st. All of these different targets, they were military targets. There was nothing nuclear that was attacked. There was nothing with the oil industry that was attacked. Israel kept it very focused and limited, but important to note that both of these targets, the SAMs, the surface-to-air missile systems, and the ballistic missile production capabilities would basically undermine Iran's ability to, on the one hand, retaliate against an Israeli attack, right? They could use missiles they've already manufactured, but then they will have difficulty in replenishing that stockpile. And it also will make it easier for Israel to, again, repeat an attack against Iran in the future, because now Iran is essentially somewhat blind by not having radars and missiles that can intercept and engage incoming enemy aircraft. Israel launched the attack in the way that it did to achieve a number of goals. The first goal is to send a message to Iran that it does not have immunity and it cannot directly attack Israel without paying a price and receiving a response. That was achieved with the attack that saw 100 combat aircraft from Israel fly the distance to Iran, a distance that people had speculated in the past, were skeptical that Israel even had the capability of flying and including Iran within its combat radius. But Israel was able to do that. And this also, by the way, has resonance for a possible potential attack one day against Iran's nuclear facilities. While in this case, Israel did not attack the nuclear installations, Iran now knows that that's a real option and that Israeli aircraft can reach its airspace, can penetrate, and can potentially attack. So that message was received by the Iranians. The way, though, that Israel has communicated this, by mostly being quiet, by not giving out too much information, not wanting to overly embarrass the regime in Iran, is basically creating what you can call the zone of deniability. It gives the Iranians the opportunity to basically say, this wasn't a big deal, not much happened, we're going to, kind of sweep it under the rug. For Israel, that's in its interest. It doesn't want to see another round. It wants to be able to close and wrap up this cycle with Iran. And if Iran needs to pretend that not much happened, then let them, right? For Israel, it knows what it attacked. We're starting to see, David, different leaks of satellite footage from the different installations that were attacked. You're seeing destruction. It's not a secret. But if the Iranians, when communicating to their own people, want to sweep it under the rug and pretend that not much happened, Israel is fine with that. Israel has no interest in overly pushing the Iranian regime to the brink that they feel the need to retaliate. With that said, there's definitely an option that Iran will respond. And this will be up to the Supreme Leader, Ali Khamenei. For that reason, the Americans have deployed already in Israel in the lead up to the attack by Israel, the THAAD, the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, which is just another layer of missile defense for Israel to be able to protect the country from an Iranian missile assault, like what happened in April and October. So Israel's prepared, but I think that the Iranians today will have to be very careful if they want to respond, because if they do, they don't have missile defense. They don't have the ability to, again, manufacture long-range ballistic missiles. So if they attack Israel, they're inviting another Israeli attack, and the next one would be an escalation and could now include oil refineries as well as nuclear installations.
Israel talking defense again this morning, saying that their laser interception system, the Iron Beam, is expected to be operational in a year. How important is that development? And also, in terms of getting the message out, how significant is that?
Yeah, the company, a couple of the companies, but one of them, Elbit, for example, announced this morning that it's going to be providing a very high-powered laser with a deal that estimates about $200 million with the Israeli Defense Ministry. It's a big jump and boost to the Israeli missile defense capabilities. And the Iron Beam, or whatever it's referred to, this laser has the ability to really kind of close the gap of where Israel has found to have an underbelly and be vulnerable, which particularly pertains to drones. This is where Hezbollah has been able to exact a deadly toll from Israel, whether it's with attacks on military bases or attacks on the home front and the civilian home front here within Israel. But the drones have been something that has been very complicated for Israel to be able to intercept, whether it's detect them and then shoot them down. But the standard, more traditional missile defense systems are not as applicable. I think that if this happens and this system is rolled out, it would provide another layer and provide Israelis with more defense. But at the end of the day, we saw how the missile defense systems that we had in place ahead of October 7th of 2023 were also just as good in intercepting Hamas rockets. Iron Dome did an amazing job, over 90% interception rate. But when they crossed the border with thousands of people to massacre, rape, murder, abduct Israelis, Iron Dome was not there to help, and it wasn't meant for that purpose. Neither would Iron Beam. So defense is very important, but we can't neglect the offensive action that is also required. And I think that's one of the big lessons of the last now 13 months of this war.
And a huge offensive action continues against Hezbollah.
Israel is continuing with its operation to clear out those villages in southern Lebanon. I think what we've discovered over the last now about 2 months of this operation is that these are not villages. These are military bases that were established by Hezbollah, which then some civilians were put there to live on top of them. There's tunnel systems. Some of them were exposed by the IDF. I mean, massive, dug into the mountain, into the rock. This wasn't like tunnels in Gaza, which is sand and dirt. This is real stone. Takes much more time, much more complicated, much more expertise. And they did this over 15, 20 years. The amount of weapons there is astonishing. Israeli soldiers who I speak to and commanders who come back from the front just talk about how it's just, they're blown away by how much of these weapons are just everywhere and the sophistication of it and how advanced their capabilities are. At the same time, as Israel is destroying this and kind of going village and destroying this infrastructure, there's a number of issues that have to be pointed out. One is that the death toll for the Israeli military is also climbing. We've seen just over 20 soldiers who have been killed just in the last week. Some of them, one a father of 10 kids, another one a father of 8 kids, another one a father of 6 kids. Too many orphans are being made here in Israel as a result of the death of these reservists. And we're seeing an awful toll that the Israeli people are paying also for this war. A lot of it has to do with the booby-trapped homes, mortar attacks that the Israeli soldiers operating in Lebanon come under. Hezbollah forces have mostly left that area, but they still are able to target the Israeli soldiers from a distance with mortars as well as with anti-tank missiles, sometimes with drones as well. But this toll that it is having on the Israeli public and the reservists in particular could be what pressures the government here in Israel to maybe, I don't want to say slam the brakes, but start to push the brakes on where this war is going in the north. The question, though, really, David, is where is it going, right? And we don't yet see what that political resolution will look like. The Americans have been trying to get the Lebanese on board for some sort of expanded UN Security Council Resolution 1701. That was the resolution that ended the 2006 Second Lebanon War, was supposed to see the deployment of a UN force called UNIFIL, which was supposed to ensure that southern Lebanon remains demilitarized. Well, we see how that was a total joke, and how Hezbollah built up these capabilities under the nose of the UN forces. So any expansion of that is really something that Israelis are going to look at with a lot of skepticism. But we do know that there needs to be some sort of political resolution here. And the question is, how do we get there? And that is still a big unknown for us.
How fair would it be to say that the restarting of talks in Doha, in terms of looking at some kind of deal there, there's a sense that there is something maybe more meaningful happening right now? Is that your take?
When it comes to Gaza, there's no question that for the most part, Israel has really achieved what it wanted to militarily. It's really at that point where you need to now figure out what we've been calling for a long time now, the day after plan. Who is taking the reins of Gaza? Who's going to control Gaza? Who is going to ensure the civilian life and the rehabilitation and the reconstruction of Gaza, while Israel at the same time will need to ensure that its security and might need to periodically continue to operate there. And we're having a difficulty seeing how that plays out, especially with the hostages, 101, about half of them believed to still be alive, being held in Gaza, and the fears that every day that passes, their lives are in total danger every hour, every minute. So if there's a chance to get them back, it has to happen now. The problem is that for the last few months, there really hasn't been any negotiations, despite the efforts of the Qataris and the Egyptians. These talks that are taking place now in Doha, and there was an Egyptian proposal that was put on the table by President al-Sisi that was supposed to see that proposed the release of 4 hostages in exchange for just a couple of days of a ceasefire, but some way to build up some goodwill towards what could maybe be a longer term ceasefire and a larger release of all the remaining hostages, and hopefully the bodies of those who are also being held. I don't know whether to be optimistic or not. I think we've been through this, unfortunately, too many times over the last year. And the torture that the hostage families go through is really just a nightmare. I can only imagine every time that there's another delegation, every time there's another report, every time there's another glimmer of hope that their loved one, a father, a son, a daughter, a wife, whoever it might be, will be coming back, is just it's heartbreaking. And we have to hope that we have somebody to negotiate with. I also want to hope that the government here in Israel is willing to pay the price that's needed to get back our people. I think militarily we're at that stage that we're ready for it, but it will take some serious political courage on the Israeli government to be able to make that deal, because it will include the release of hundreds, if not thousands, of Palestinian prisoners. And that will be something that will be maybe political dynamite for our Prime Minister Netanyahu, but it's time that this happens. So we have to hope that our government has political courage, but we also have to hope that there's somebody on the other side that we can make a deal with. And as of now, I'm not sure there is.